June 17th CRTPA meeting is now called to order. Mr. Executive Director?
Yes, first up, we need to open up the public hearing, have a roll call.
Commissioner Barfield, Commissioner McMillan,
Where's Betsy?
Commissioner Merritt,
Present.
Commissioner Villa-BCA,
Present.
Commissioner Dozier. Here. Commissioner Maddox, Commissioner Minor,
Present.
Commissioner Matlow,
Here.
Commissioner Richardson,
I'm here.
Commissioner Williams-Cox. Thank you.
We do have a quorum, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Any proposed amendment?
Yes, sir. The purpose of the public hearing today is to amend our 2040 Regional Mobility Plan to add 3 projects related to I-10. DOT has obtained funding to do a project development and environmental study on 3 sections of I-10. The first one being from Midway to the Leon County line. The second from the Leon County line, from Gadsden County to west of Capitol Circle, basically where the 4-lane ends now, and then east of Capitol Circle to State Road 90. The purpose of these PD&Es is to actually look at the potential to 6-lane those sections of I-10, in essence extending the 6-lane portion that we have right now.
Motion to approve.
Second.
There is a motion and a second to approve. Questions?
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, I was catching up with my notes there for a second. Moving a little quick today. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
We did have an update in here about the questions that were raised at the potential for a new interchange in Gaston County. Is that right? And that, you just referenced that we were going to look into that. Is that right, Greg?
Yes, ma'am. Actually, but that particular issue, or that particular interchange is actually not covered under either of these segments. That's actually further west of Midway.
I apologize, Mr. Chair. That's why I was looking at my notes. I thought you had referenced it in one of the items and couldn't remember if it was this item or...
I'm hoping I didn't.
Huh?
I'm hoping I didn't.
You're hoping you didn't. Okay. It was really just an acknowledgement that we had talked about it in the past, but it wasn't germane to the items that we were going to approve today.
Yes, ma'am.
It was just referencing that we had discussed that in the past. So that was it. Forgive me. Thank you.
Oh, you are welcome. And before I carry this vote, I would like to state in record that because some of the commissioners here will be leaving early, we'll want all items to be voted on to be done before 2:30. So at least we have a quorum to carry that through. Okay. Any other questions?
Is a roll call vote?
Yes.
It's a roll call vote.
Commissioner Merritt,
Aye.
Commissioner Villa-BCA,
Aye.
Commissioner Dozier,
Aye.
Commissioner Minor,
Aye.
Commissioner Matlow,
Aye.
Commissioner Richardson.
Yes.
Thank you.
Next item.
Mr. Chairman, as part of any agenda, we include a section for public comment or citizen comment, but I believe we have 2 comments, but I believe they want to speak as part of the regular agenda, which we'll move into next.
Okay.
Where are we?
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. So, yeah, actually, first we're at the agenda modification.
Mr. Executive Director, do we have any agenda modification?
No, sir, but I will mention that apparently we're on a time crunch today with 2 of our members, so just everybody keep that in mind as we move forward.
Okay. Citizens comment now, right? Okay. I have here 2 speakers' request form. One is from Sue Ellen Gardner. Okay. You on?
Right now?
Yes.
What's the time? How much time they have? 3 minutes.
3 minutes.
Okay, so yes, my name is Sue Ellen Gardiner, and I've been a Tallahassee resident on the south side for 19 years. I'm here to speak against the project of 363 Woodville Highway and State Road 2263, specifically segment 5. Earlier last week, I emailed everyone in this committee regarding the concerns of the community. So currently, we have, on South Adams Street has 3 lanes going north and 2 lanes going south. Monroe Street has 2 lanes going south and 2 lanes going north. That's 2 options, 5 lanes total going north and 4 lanes total going south. And the proposed plan would eliminate 1 option down to 1 street and also 1 lane. So combined with the travelers from Woodville, the travelers from Crawfordville, and the travelers in the surrounding community, I am not sure how that is a better plan. There is no congestion right now in that segment, the segment from Gale Avenue to Paul Russell Road. And so 60% of Woodville residents work in Tallahassee, Florida, and of 5,000 of Crawfordville's citizens, a little less than half work in Tallahassee. So that's all of those people plus the community now herded on this one-way street. Again, I'm not sure how that's better for the community and how this plan even came about. And I do have what I emailed you with my letter that I emailed you in protest, plus the signatures of close to 400 people that is also in protest of this project. And I'll leave this here for you all.
Okay, thank you. The next speaker request I have is Lynn Jones.
Good afternoon, and thank you, Commission and board members, for allowing me to speak. I'm Lynn Jones, 3211 Notre Dame Street, Tallahassee, Florida. First and foremost, I want to say that I did receive Sue's email, and I placed it on social media. I'm very concerned regarding these one-way streets. I remember Call Street was one way, and then not too long, they changed it back. And my thing is a feasibility study. Is there a study as to why they are they projecting to make these streets one way? I don't know. I haven't read one. I guess I haven't done enough research. And also, I think there should be a moratorium on roundabouts unless there is something for that particular street that they have had a significant amount of accidents or something. Because yes, roundabouts are good, but is it necessary to put one everywhere? And that's what I'm finding, that I'm reading, okay, we're going to do a new roundabout. Why? The next thing I wanted to speak on is the Star Metro Priority Project list. My grandkids can't drive, and they're going to start riding the bus because they have to get around town, and I do promote mass transit. But there are not enough covers. They're going to get wet. So I do propose that in the priority your projects that you add more covers at the stops, and not only in my area in the south side of town, but as I go around, there are covers that need to be in many different areas. And also, I'm concerned about the bicycle pedestrian plan, additional funding. I don't see a lot of people riding bicycles in Tallahassee. So consistently. So I'm just concerned as to why they're adding additional funding for bicycles. I know some people they need the lanes for the bicycles, but I don't see a whole lot of people riding bicycles, and why we're putting so much money in that area. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. The other speaker form I have here, I can't really read his name quite clearly, but I think it looks like Bill Proctor.
I know it was chicken scratch, Mr. Chairman. Thank you so much. Mr. Chairman, Commissioner staff, arise this afternoon to speak to the same issue which has been brought up by the previous two speakers. I've offered to you maps of what they are concerned with. We absolutely support and excited about Woodville Highway and its potential to facilitate the movement of north and south. We need that. It would parallel and complement what has occurred from DOT on Crawfordville Road. Both of these highways serve as emergency evacuation routes, so it makes a lot of sense that we give attention to these corridors. I ask your attention at the proposal of which Woodville Highway or South Monroe Street, beginning there at Tram Road. When you look at 363 coming from Paul Russell, and you get there at Tram and you make a right, you're forced to make a right turn. What's occurring here from Gale Avenue, there at the bottom end of the roundabout, if you want to call this a figure 8 roundabout, is a one-way street heading north. And for years, since Moses has been a little boy, traffic has gone all the way down to Woodville Highway without deviating. FDOT is asking the citizens who travel this route to come down to Tram Road, which you see Tram would be extended over to Adams Street, and you would be forced to detour. Now, if you want to really think about what this looks like, I can tell you exactly where you need to go. Come down Meridian and be forced to make a right onto the police station street, 607, one of those streets, and then make a left back onto Monroe and go up to Fifth Avenue and make a left and then continue coming down Thomasville Road. That's exactly what we're about to do here, is block what has been the flow of traffic heading south, and now we create an irregular posture for drivers to have to navigate. I'm asking your consideration to not approve this plan, but that this plan is modified to be less cumbersome to our drivers, that we not create another 6th Avenue, 7th Avenue, whatever that is, right there by Meridian, and that bad, real bad, where Thomasville merges into that street. Thomasville Road comes right there with Meridian Road, and Meridian Road side is forced to go right. This is what we're doing. We don't have this problem, and we're asking that FDOT not create this problem. And we're asking for your empathy. I have gotten citizen concerns, constituent concerns about this. This is not going to be a great movement for the South Side, and creating an irregular pathway here at the fairground, here at Tram Road. And if you look at this very, very carefully, from what you see, when you come down South Monroe Street, you won't be able to make a left onto Tram. So even if you were heading home to Tram or trying to go to the Southwood Office Park, the legislators would have to come down this street and make a right turn onto the extended Tram Road and bend back down on South Adams, come back around Gale Avenue, this other one, and then come back up to make a right onto Tram Road. That's a problem. We can do better. Our engineers are bright. I know that you don't want to create confusion. It's not that people are not intelligent enough to negotiate signs and the new dangers that are created. It's just that why create and force them to take these pop quizzes every time they come to this intersection if we don't have to? So I ask this body to please reject the proposal here and not foster and impose this upon us. Secondly, if I might, I want to ask what is the timetable for the acquisition of right-of-way? And is there one? And what is the timetable subsequent to begin the construction of this road? Could staff or anyone tell me in terms of the steps of securing the land and all of that, what are the timetables?
Commissioner Proctor, I'm just looking at here, over the next 2 years, it looks as though DOT has about, I'm going to say around $12 million in right-of-way acquisition, but currently there is no funding construction, funding program for the construction itself.
Okay, so within the next 2 years, property with them. Now, is this a complementary project to the rest of Woodville Highway from Gale Avenue down to Capitol Circle?
That's the second phase of it, if I remember correctly.
Okay.
Yeah, the Capitol Circle to Gale Avenue, it's broken into 2 segments.
Are they working?
Yes, so they're working, I would say, concurrently.
Okay. Well, as you're engineering that, I think that some of the angst of property owners along that way has been the disclarity of the timetable. And I would like to see communicated to the owners in that area, and if there's going to be a public hearing, that you bring them together quickly and explain to the community south what's occurring, its timetable, and those things. I thank you very much for your board hearing us out, as well as these 2 citizens. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Proctor. What's the commission will on
Motion to approve consent.
motion for
Second.
motion and a second to approve consent item? Commissioner Dozier?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I need a reorientation here. We have taken citizen comments on a range of issues that that are on later agenda items, correct? So we're back to just approving consent?
Yes, ma'am.
I would like to go back to Woodville and Crawfordville Highway when time permits, but we can get through consent first. Thank you.
Okay. There is a motion to approve consent items, and second, all in favor, show by the sign of vote aye. Aye. The roll call, okay. Opposed? Ayes have it. Next item, please.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, there'll be TIP amendments, and this will be a roll call vote, and Mr. Burke is going to take care of those for you.
Okay. Good afternoon, members. We are here to approve the fiscal year 2019 to 2023 Transportation Improvement Program to reflect the 3 projects that you all just amended into the Regional Mobility Plan.
Motion to approve.
Second.
There is a motion and a second to approve this item. Question?
Yes.
Hearing none. Roll call.
All right. Commissioner Merritt,
Aye.
Commissioner Villavisia,
Aye.
Commissioner Dozier. Commissioner Dozier.
I said aye. I'm sorry. Aye.
Okay. Commissioner Maddox.
Aye.
Commissioner Minor.
Aye.
Commissioner Matlow.
Aye.
Commissioner Richardson.
Yes.
Unanimously passed.
Okay. Yes, and the next item, 6B, will be the fiscal year 2020-24 Transportation Improvement Program. This is our overall TIP, which of course kind of lays out our projects over the next 5 years, and Mr. Burke will take care of this one as well.
Okay. Hello again. This new Transportation Improvement Program reflects the state work program that you all had a synopsis of provided at your December board meeting. This is something we adopt every year to reflect the new state work program.
Motion to approve.
Second.
There is
Question, Mr. Chairman?
a motion to approve and a second. Commissioner Richardson?
Yeah, I just noticed for Leon County, the construction of Capitol Circle, the lane widening from Crawfordville Road to Spring Hill is deferred by 2 years.
That is correct.
Is that part of the state's work program, or, I mean,
Exactly. Yeah, it reflects what it is in the state work program, and that was deferred based upon state revenue estimates and their development of the most recent work program.
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions? Well, Commissioner Dozier.
Mr. Chair, I have a general question about some of the citizen comments we've received regarding Crawfordville Highway expansion, and I know that information is reflected in the long-range item as well as the 5-year item, correct? Thank you. So I'm not sure if this is the appropriate time to raise that question. You had the emails, Greg, and
Actually, no, ma'am. That's the first I heard of the emails when they were
That's
mentioned.
the one I was, probably the roadways item that's next, Kristen, is where that's at.
that's the one we should reflect on. Okay, so in this item, though, in 5 years, in the next 5 years, I did not see, and I may have missed it, funding portions of the Crawfordville expansion in Wakulla within this 5-year?
Crawfordville, yes, ma'am.
Yes, 319.
Yeah, that's, I think there's a little bit of right-of-way acquisition, but the bulk of that is construction funding for the segments that are south of the Wakulla-Leon County line.
Okay. All right, I'll come back to that in a second. I just want to make sure we're keeping up with where the phasing is on that, and I wasn't sure if I needed to ask a question prior to approving the TIP. I've got no problems with where it stands now. We'll come back in a second. Thank you.
Ms. Mitchell?
Commissioner Merritt,
Aye.
Commissioner Villabisier,
Aye.
Commissioner Dozier,
Aye.
Commissioner Maddox. Commissioner Minor,
Aye.
Commissioner Matlow,
Aye.
Commissioner Richardson,
Yes.
unanimously passed.
The action, right?
Yes, sir. No, we need to go through the
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, item 7A is approval of our project priority list. Mr. Williams has suggested that since we have some questions on the regional mobility plan, as well as possibly the bike ped trails or bike ped project list, that if it's the will of the board that we can approve the other ones in mass, I guess, and then talk about those separately. That's up to the will of the board.
And what's the will of the board?
So which ones are non-controversial?
From what I can tell, the item number 2, the TSM, item number 4, the regional trails list, number 5, the Star Metro list, and 6, the Tallahassee airport list.
I'll make a motion to approve those.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I do have a question on number 5, the Star Metro Priority
Minus number 5.
Project List.
Minus number 5.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair. We need to do this so that we can get a quorum to vote before.
But yes, ma'am, to maintain our quorum.
Okay. I'm fine with moving forward with some components of it. I don't want to shortchange any part of the conversation. I'm wondering if we need to move this to another meeting, if we need to shortchange conversation today.
No, we actually had to have this submitted to DOT by September 1st, I believe is our date, and we don't have another meeting until after September 1st.
Okay.
My motion stands.
So the motion is to approve right now 2, 5, 2, 4,
And 6.
246.
2, 4, 6. Okay, and
Is there a second?
a second?
Second.
Okay, I was going to second it. Okay, there is a motion to approve 2, 4, and 6 on item 7A. And a question? Hearing none.
No, sir. It's not just a voice.
Okay, hearing none. All in favor, show by the sign of vote aye.
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 Opposed? The ayes have it. Yeah, Mr. Administrator, Director?
Okay, Mr. Chair, first would be our regional mobility plan roadway priority list, item 7.1, and this was the list that will contain the Woodville project that's under the comments were made on previously.
Okay. Just quickly, as a background, this is something we do every year, like we just adopted the Transportation Improvement Program. Every year we provide these project priority lists to the Florida DOT so that they have an idea of what this agency wants to see funded. So with regards to where these projects come from, the majority of them come from our agency's long-range transportation plan or regional mobility plan. For our transportation partners, Storm Metro, Tallahassee Airport, they come from their agency respective plans. Also, a couple months ago, you approved the Transportation Alternatives Project Priority List. That comes from a competitive grant program. With regards to today, total, you all are approving 6 of these lists. As you know, you just approved a few of them. With regards to actually the roadways project priority lists, these are projects that are identified in the long-range transportation plan, as I just said, the regional mobility plan. With regards also to this list compared to last year's list, there were really minor changes made to this list. We just updated the funding source that we needed for the next phases through the assistance of the Florida DOT and their long-range estimates. And then one project that was broken out into 2 segments, Walani Boulevard, we actually combined it into one segment to reflect how it's funded in the current work program based upon the receipt of TRIP funding, Transportation Regional Incentive Program funding. And that said, this is how, I know you can't really read it too well here, but this is how the list looks that we're proposing to be adopted today.
Motion to approve with the caveat that we, in Crawfordville Road, we flip-flop 3 and 4. In other words, the part in downtown Crawfordville will be done before the part south of Crawfordville. That's my motion. This is what I talked about last meeting.
Sorry.
Commissioner Matters.
Mr. Chair, I mean, just procedurally, I actually prefer to hear from the speakers prior to the item, but as normal, that's not the way we do it here. So now that we're on the item, as I understand, I think most of the questions were about design, not necessarily a priority, as this list indicates. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And then the questions about right-of-way, Commissioner Parker, I believe he addressed those questions for you about when the right-of-way acquisition will happen. All right. I see right here that it says, 1.1 million in 2020 right-of-way acquisition on the piece of Woodville Highway that Commissioner Proctor and the speakers were talking about.
Yes, sir. And there's actually, if you notice, that says fiscal year 2020, which begins July 1st. There's actually some funds on fiscal year 19 as well. That's when the bulk of the funds were programmed.
So actually, the right-of-way acquisition will start.
It should, according to that schedule, it should be underway now, but I don't know specifically if it is.
Is that what you understood? Yeah, that's what I thought. Because Commissioner Proctor, as I understand, I thought you understood him to say something different, or no? I thought you said 2 years, but right. Okay, so 1.1 in fiscal year 2020, and then years out, there'll be some more right-of-way acquisition.
Based on what I see right now, they appear to have right-of-way fully funded.
Okay.
And again, but apparently there's going to be some carryover money. If she's been told they're going to start acquiring next month, there's a sizable chunk of money that's in this current fiscal year, so I don't know if they're running behind or what. But then we're seeking, as the chart says, we're seeking construction funding on those 2 segments.
So approval of this portion of the item does not necessarily approve the design of the road, correct?
No, sir, but the design has already been completed. Once you're into right-of-way acquisition, that means the design has been completed.
Understood. All right, thank you.
Commissioner Proctor, if you don't mind, come and let's speak into the mic, please. Record it.
So you're saying right now that we started to acquire right-of-way, there is no wiggle room when it comes to the design of the road?
No, sir. We'd have to go back to the department and request they take another look at the design.
Yeah, with us starting the right-of-way acquisition process, we are at least 90% planned. Always we can make some minor adjustments, but what has been discussed earlier at this meeting, that would be a full redesign, right, which would potentially require an update to the PD&E. There's a lot of variables there.
And what would that do to, what exactly would that do to the timing of the project as a whole?
I think it would depend on the scale of the redesign, as Mr. Paulk had said. If it's a significant redesign, then you're probably going back and starting over, going back into the PD&E process to determine what those impacts would be.
Dr. V is leaving, so I'll take over the chairmanship. I'd probably stay till 2:45, but I got a budget workshop.
So last question. I think the concerns that were voiced here are valid, but it seems like our options are very limited, except for going back and just really starting this project all over, is what you're saying. There's no other option.
Potentially, I think it would depend on the degree of changes. I think you spoke correctly before. If you approve this as it is today, I don't think there's really any impact. We would still have to go back and possibly talk to the department to see what some of the options were.
Is there a way to get to where we're trying to get to in your professional opinions without making major changes to the design itself?
No, sir.
No.
But based on the comments that were made, those would not be able to be accomplished through design tweaks.
Thank you.
We got a motion. Did anybody second it?
Second for discussion.
Mr. Chair, you made the motion. I think now that you've taken over as chair, you can no longer make the motion.
I wasn't chair when I made it.
Is that okay?
You can make a motion.
Okay.
Let's go ahead and hear from the citizen, okay? We've got the motion on the floor in a second, so we can discuss it. Sue Ellen Gardner? Did I get it right?
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, I'm sorry, I didn't say last time, my note paper fell in a puddle of water, so it was hard to read. But today, my goal is for this committee and all entities involved to rethink the current plan to create the one-ways on South Adam and South Monroe Street. Also, that any subsequent acquisition for the right-of-way to be purchased in July next month be stopped. And that a new sensible plan, like simply increasing the number of lanes on Gale Avenue by purchasing that lot that is actually for sale, Gale Avenue, and really Gale Avenue is a point of congestion. And even South Adams Street and Monroe Street, widen those lanes if you so choose to. So I did want to state my actual goal without, because I gave you, the why I'm against it. But okay, thank you.
Thank you. Bryant, would it be fair to say, in full disclosure, I'm from Wakulla County, so I don't really have a big dog in this fight, so nobody get mad at me. The Leon County folks, basically, it's either take it or leave it at this point. Either redesign the whole thing and start over, or approve it. And is that an accurate statement?
It's accurate, but you can't always approve this document with caveats. If you want to say, Department, here's our priority list. However, we've got major concerns with priority number one. Please do not consider it for funding in this next cycle. That will allow you to adopt the project priority list, in essence, putting this project on hold for any new money. As we move forward with our right-of-way acquisition, funding's program, funding is there. We would anticipate continuing to buy right-of-way. As part of adopting this, you could do, or separate from this, you could pass a resolution, basically just, as she stated, stop right-of-way acquisition until we have a moment.
Just as a selfish plug, if the board does that and says, don't fund right-of-way acquisition, that money will now go to a project lower down on the list, correct? Most likely.
Yes, sir.
Which would be Crawfordville Highway.
Nicely done, Mr.
Yeah, I would say not guaranteed.
Not guaranteed, but possible.
That's usually the simplest method versus trying to all of a sudden start rearranging your priorities.
This Capitol Circle Southwest, is that a blueprint project?
That's actually funded for construction.
Okay, so it's, okay.
And that the amount that's there in the right-of-way is not nearly enough to.
All right, let's discuss away then. Kristen, you want to
Mr.
start?
Chair, I'm sorry.
Nick, would you
I mean, if she had a
No,
card up
you
first.
can go ahead, and Commissioner Richardson, you started to chime in before as well. I can wait, Mr. Chair, if the other comments want to go
Who
first.
wants to go first? Kurt?
Were there any community meetings, to get community input on this project?
Commissioner, that would have gone, there would have been community meetings as part of the PD&E, which my assumption at this point, because a lot of this work predates me being here, probably in the last 4 or 5 years, and then there should have been public meetings held as part of the design as well. And again, I apologize, I wasn't aware of an email that you all got, so I'm hearing a lot of this for the first time right now, so I don't know that I'm prepared to give you a whole lot of
Yeah, I don't think I
direction.
received it either.
I'm done.
Okay.
Those are my questions.
I'm inclined to ask for postponement of right-of-way acquisition on item number 1 and push that funding down as long as it can stay. I know you said it's a possibility we could use it. The only thing that kind of gives me pause is that it does delay the completion of the project. And I know that Woodville Highway project is a key project in our transportation plan on the south side of town. But when you have a district commissioner and some constituents here that are concerned about the design of it, even if it did, even if we are far past the point where we actually had that conversation, I think it's valid enough for us to maybe pump the brakes a little bit. The other thing that gives me pause is that, if we do postpone the funding on that item, we get right back here, let's say next year in the priority list, and I would imagine that would probably still be the same priority, and with that funding coming back, it seems like the only option that we have is to start over from square one. And I wonder what that means for the money that was spent already for the right-of-way, not right-of-way, but the PD&E that happened a few years ago. I would imagine that we would have to go back through the process and spend those dollars again, and that part right there also gives me pause. So, I'm willing to give it a chance to postpone this year, but I tell you, I'm hoping that, and I leaned over and talked to Brian a couple times. I'm trying to figure out a way that we can meet in the middle on this, and he's telling me that what's being asked for is a very substantial change to the project and will require full PD&E, but maybe a year with some meetings and some consideration can get us to a place that's a middle ground. I've asked if there's a middle ground. He said, I think you said it could be. Maybe not, but we haven't even had that conversation. So I will ask I'm going to go ahead and take a chance, ask to make a motion to add to the motion, amend the motion to approve the list with a postponement on the right-of-way acquisition of the first priority Woodville Highway until the next funding cycle.
And switch 3 and 4,
And switch 3 and 4. I'm just asking for amendment to the motion you already made.
We'll call it a substitute motion.
No, sir. I just want to make an amendment to your motion, if you don't mind.
Okay, well, let me hear what everybody else has to say, and then I'll.
Yes, sir. If I have to make a substitute, I will, but I would like to amend.
Kristen?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First, on the Woodville Highway piece, I want to acknowledge that, and Greg, you're hinting at this, the public meetings, the design conversation about the potential one-way, I believed happened not just before you were here. Jack, you're nodding here. We've done a lot better with public communication on a lot of different platforms in recent years, and consistently better. I think that's fair for everyone. So I do remember the discussion about the potential one-way here and everything like that, and I'm going to be blunt and say that I thought it was still a question as to whether or not we were going to move forward with a one-way option. So when the conversation came up, and the reason why I started with the other, it may be because the way we discussed it wasn't as clear to me as it has been in the last few years. I want to acknowledge that we've tried very hard to get it more clear at this table and for public. So I thought there were more decisions to be made on options. And I assume if we're moving forward with this, and based on the conversation that just happened, an option was selected based on the criteria at that time, it was this one-way option, and we decided to move forward with it. And help me here, my memory is that every option presented by FDOT, our staff, was challenging. There was no easy option in this area, and the one-way option may have provided more benefits than others. Is that a fair statement? Can anyone help fill this out a little bit?
That would be my assumption. Jack was here at the time, so I'll
I
throw
hate to
him
put you on
under
the
bus.
spot, Jack, but you were, as always, at the table with us.
That's my job.
Yes.
So if you remember, if you recall, some of the original concepts were going back to the old 4 Points intersection. There was a flyover option that was not pursued and not really accepted very well. And so there were several options that included looking at the other options or potentials of connecting those two corridors, Woodville and Crawfordville. There was substantial discussion at FHWA and at DOT. We had numerous public meetings with this concept and through the PD&E process, and this was the best solution to address all the issues that we had relating to capacity and movement of traffic in that area, without having to go back to the old 4 Point intersection, which was not going to be very productive in terms of meeting the capacity needs in the future.
Anybody learned to drive in this community when there was 4 Point intersection? That was challenging, and it stands out in my mind. So it was a problem intersection. Okay, thank you for that update. I am fine with the motion as it is, as it relates to Woodville Highway, and putting a pause on this. I am concerned, Commissioner Maddox, you were saying about potential impacts to this project or others. Whatever we do, I think we need a quick refresher on what those options were, what the challenges are, because we may come right back to this being, unfortunately, the only way out of a challenging situation. But it has been several years. Circumstances could have changed. I, for one, would just like a full refresher. Would that help us, whether or not the motion passes?
I'm sure it would. I know it would help me. I will be honest with you, I'm a little concerned about asking the department to halt funding, because we're going to get right back into that issue that was talked a lot about when I got here, changing priorities, asking, them to move things around. And again, I apologize, this is the first I'm hearing of all this today. My guess would be, and it sounds like the young lady has talked to someone in the department, I don't know that they would be acquiring the right-of-way next month. My assumption would be they would start the process, but I don't know what you were told. I talked to a couple of gentlemen out who have property, I believe, that's been targeted for acquisition, and they said they had not been notified yet. So I would like some time to find out exactly where they are in that process and maybe go from there. But I am concerned about sending that message to DOT that we want you to stop funding on a particular phase of a project. But again, it's whatever you all direct me to do, that's what I will do. But I at least want to bring that up.
This extends from Capitol Circle all the way up to here, right? It's not just this
Yes.
roundabout.
Yes, sir.
It's the part in front of Pick and Pull and all that. That's included in this also. So if you're throwing the baby and the bathwater out.
And Ms. Vice Chair, that's what I was going to come back and ask a question. And Brent, this may be one for you. I'm wondering, let me start with, I believe strongly that from your position, I hope from the district secretary, from others, that you all know we've tried very hard to be as consistent as possible with our transportation lists, much better than we have been in the past. So with the caveat that we know we don't want to make changes at this late hour, we don't want to harm past funding, is there a way to focus on one half of this with right-of-way acquisition, give us some time to affirm this decision in September, even though it's after September 1, approve this, send it forward, but focus on that Capitol Circle, the southern end of this portion? Or that may not be anything you could answer today. I understand
Actually,
that.
that's the way it's been broken up. It's been segmented, and all the necessary right-of-way funds for right-of-way acquisition on the southernmost segment has been programmed.
Okay.
And so we're underway with acquisition there. So this
This is
would
new
only
money for
affect
the other.
Where's the project limits, Bryant, going south?
Capitol Circle from, Capitol Circle to Gale.
To Gail.
So you program right-of-way purchase all the way up to Gale.
Right.
And then Gale North is a second phase, basically.
Yeah, because as Jack said, there was a lot of controversy with this northern segment, so the department decided to break it out at that at Gale in order to be able to maintain our production schedule with the southern segment as we developed.
Mr. Chairman, if I could, looking at the work program here, there's $2.3 million on the portion from Gale to Paul Russell that's in current year, and then just a tick over $4 million available July 1st, basically to start. There's about $6.5 million total, but the bulk of that is in 2020.
Rick, go ahead.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Gardner, can you refresh my memory? You said your recollection is that there was one public meeting in 2016 prior to.
You wasn't finished.
Yes, there was one public meeting that I found in 2016, and of those nearly 400 signatures, not one of them knew about this project. Like it was said before, we are in support of that other segment, the Woodville piece. That's fine, but this plan here, that makes absolutely no sense to have everybody herded down this one. You are eliminating, and I'm not sure how that was even the first and best option for this plan.
Okay. Thank you much, Ms. Gardner. Bryant, how much was spent on PD&E prior to the ROW phase? Do you all remember?
I don't have that available.
Okay. All right. And then, actually, Brian, here's a question I had for you. Will FDOT likely keep this funding? Let's say we halt on ROW on right-of-way for now. Will the $1.1 million, can we be relatively assured that money is going to stay within this project list?
As it stands now, the department would hold that money on that project. However, that is our next fiscal year. We're monitored on our ability to commit our dollars. So we could potentially we could extend out the right-of-way acquisition a couple of months in order for us to get together and determine if there's anything we can do. But, it wouldn't be a full year. We could just go without committing those dollars.
Sure, I understand. But it's unlikely that it would actually go to a different district.
It would stay
within our.
It could potentially
Bring it on down
go
to
to anybody in the
It would stay under the jurisdiction of this MPO.
No, sir.
No,
It would
that's
go
not
to the next
guaranteed.
available project that needs a right-of-way acquisition.
Okay. Well, one thing I think we ought to consider is if you have a deadline of September, I'm not adverse to actually having another CRTPA meeting before September, specifically just about this item, where we go back and we review the options that were presented during the design phase, during the public hearing, and talk about the pros and cons of each. I hesitate to ask FDOT to hold on funding that it's been already spent with PD&E and halt something that's midway through. But I also want to make sure that we're listening to the concerns of our constituents. And so I'd like us to consider at least the idea of having a meeting between now and September talking about just this item, having a public hearing, inviting the 400 people that signed, having them come to this meeting and hear the pros and cons of why we arrived at this option.
Mr. Chair.
Oh, Chris, I actually cut her off. So go ahead, Kristen.
It's okay. Commissioner Maddox. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Dozier. Actually, I think that's an excellent idea. I think the only thing between us and being able to work this out prior to September is a meeting, and us deciding that our chair calling for a special meeting, or us even instructing our executive director to come back with a special meeting. And I think this rises dedication. As I was talking, actually, when I was talking to Greg, that's exactly what I was talking about. What are the options here? Because I would hate to see that 1.1 million go to another district when we desperately need it here. And to be honest with you, Commissioner Proctor and I were just talking a second ago, and we talked about how long we waited to get some kind of money flowing towards this Woodville Highway project. And so to postpone the funding, that to me would be an absolute last resort. And so what I would ask, what my substitute motion would be, well, let me ask you this, Greg. Will we need to reconsider, or will we need to postpone all projects on this list in order to address that one? Or could we just pull out that one?
No, sir. I think my suggestion would be at this point, kind of cobbling all this together, I would recommend that you all go ahead and approve the list as presented, and then give us some time to pull some of the information that Commissioner Dozier was referring to I need to get a better handle on what was in the email that came to you all, because again, I have not seen that, and see if there's possible some different reworks we could do within the existing design. It's still probably going to cause some issues, but first and foremost, I don't want us to lose the funding. There may be some options that aren't as impactful as the design, but I just don't know enough about it right now to be able to tell you what those may or may not be.
I hesitate to approve the listing when I can just postpone, decision on this item until a meeting that's called in between now and September, and give you time to get the information, and then take full action on the item. So my question would be, again, can I approve the portions of the list that we all agree on and then pull this piece out, or do I need to pull all 7A out together and reconsider or consider it at another date?
I think if you're going to do it that way, the cleanest way to do it will be to postpone action on the overall list.
I'll make a substitute motion that we postpone action on this item to a date certain where we will have a special meeting between now and, I would say now and August. So anytime between now and August that we have.
We're on break in August.
Okay, so July?
It would have to be July.
Okay.
Wanted to remind myself, and this was based on just a Google search, so it's not exhaustive. We probably got this in our records. But we had two different consultants, and May 2012 is the first item that I found about looking at the various options, including the one-way option. And as I'm thinking through this, I'm reminded, and there may only be a couple people at the table who were here in 2012. So yes, an update would be good, but I do not want to hold it up, this project, and this one-way is going to be a challenge no matter what. I think it's either a no-build or a one-way, just trying to refresh my memory. So I'm going to put a pause on that for just a second. I'd like to hear more. The Crawfordville Road segments, though, coming back to that, and Mr. Chair, you're suggesting, I want to make sure we're all clear on this, because I've heard comments from Leon and Wakulla folks about this. I believe you have, and there's emails in our agenda. So, Greg, if I'm correct in my segments here on Crawfordville Highway, our priority number 3, Alaska to now the one that's currently under construction is the first phase, right?
The first two.
Two phases.
There's two phases.
Fully funded. One's under construction.
From East Ivan Road north to the Leon County line is fully funded.
Yeah.
And under construction. And what Commissioner Merritt was talking about was moving the section that that would pick up at East Ivan and go south above the next segment, which would be project number 3, Lost Creek Bridge to North Alaska Way.
They were leapfrogging over Crawfordville, Kristen, basically.
Yeah, okay. Let me try to ask this a different way. I understand that I've had to look at the map to see where all these roads are. The issue, the critical question that has come to us from people who are traveling to and from Wakulla, and every time I've heard them, I've said, but we wanted to fund Wakulla first, Mr. Vice Chair. Of course we did. But there's going to be a bottleneck. And from my reading of this, it is the Wakulla line up to Wallace, which is ranked as number 9, the project number 9 for us in the long-range transportation plan, right?
Yes, ma'am.
That is the last section. After all phases, including Crawfordville proper, is funded and constructed, then way down the line, after we do several other projects, we get to what would be a remaining 2-lane segment from the Wakulla County line to Wallace, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Where it picks back up at 4-lane. The bottlenecks that we're seeing right now coming into town, population growth, the economic development, going to school in Leon County from Wakulla, all of those resonate with me. What is really concerning, though, is an evacuation route, is an emergency vehicle getting down there. If we're going from 4 lanes to 2 lanes at some yet-to-be-determined date where we would correct this issue, and then we're back to 4 lanes for the rest of Crawfordville Highway down to 98, I'm having a real struggle wrapping my mind around why even this shift, Mr. Vice Chair, that you're suggesting is going to solve our problem. I'm not a Wakulla County resident. There may be other factors here, but I do think there's a life safety and evacuation question in addition to all those day-to-day questions of just efficiency about why that stretch from the county line to Wallace is left out for so long. And I'm wondering if there's something else we need to look at, not to get Leon funding before Wakulla, but to support Wakulla County residents. So I wanted to put that on the table and get more specifics about it.
Can I answer that?
Go ahead.
I talked to Rachel Panetta about this. I'm sure that's one you've talked to. And once
I've talked to several people, yes.
Once I explained it to her, I asked Greg about this. Like I told her, if you labor under the assumption that everybody that lives in Crawfordville is trying to get to Tallahassee, then that would be a valid argument. But the traffic counts indicate 14,000 right at the section Kristen's talking about versus 19,000 in Crawfordville. The bottleneck for our citizens is the intersections in Crawfordville, not the section between the county line north. There's very few turnoffs. I don't know what level of service is. It's not D or E, is it, Brian?
It's not through that northern segment.
No. So the level of service, because I asked Greg about, well, at least let's do the Leon County part before the part south of Crawfordville. But if we try to move a project that's not even at capacity up above, another one, then it may not ever get funded.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Yes, and actually, Commissioner Merritt and I talked about this last week. One of the things you have to look at is what phase needs to be funded, which in this case is design. And the conversation that he and I had, when you look at Orange Avenue, that's actually for design as well. When I look at those two from a traffic capacity standpoint, in my mind, Orange Avenue has a much greater need because there's significantly more traffic. The other thing we did take a look at, as in going back to the Crawfordville piece, I've seen some of the emails that talk about crash problems and all that, but when you go and look at the crash history along that segment in Leon County, there's not much of a crash history at all. So from a safety standpoint, there's not really an issue there. That's what the other thing you have to take into consideration is what phase needs funding, because Commissioner Merritt had talked about, putting that all the way up to the top of the list or there close to it. And quite frankly, at the end of the day, I don't think that makes a whole lot of difference because DOT has funding targets for each of these phases, whether it be PE, construction, design, whatever. I would hope that either of those, Orange Avenue and the Crawford Road section that need design, get funded here hopefully in the near term. But I would not recommend moving Crawfordville up above something like Orange, again, back to the traffic need. The traffic need on Orange Avenue is significantly higher than it is on Crawfordville Road in that particular, when you look at it strictly from a capacity standpoint.
Thank you for that. From my reading, my time on this board, there is historic traffic data that we base a lot of things on, but we also consider future conditions.
Sure.
And there's been a backup a couple times a day for most of my life coming out of Wakulla Highway. You know, I have spent time. The same can be true for Thomasville Road.
Exactly.
You choose to live in Bradfordville, you're going to get some traffic morning and night, right?
I would not argue with that line.
So I'm not saying the backup is the critical piece, but taking a road from 4 lanes to 2 for a short segment for an unknown duration of time on a primary evacuation route, I am concerned enough to ask the question as if that raises issues that we have not contemplated with the data because we're looking at current crash patterns and things like that. It doesn't surprise me at all that that area has less traffic incidents than the other areas because there's not as many side streets.
Exactly.
There's not people moving in and out of traffic. That makes sense. That doesn't mean there wouldn't be an issue in the future if we narrow the roads down. So approving this is not design or anything like that. This is the long-range funding and the ranking here. So we could ask for an agenda item in the next year to explore how we're basing these decisions for this project or the others. Is that right?
Well, that'll actually be one of our topics. We're starting the regional mobility plan update, and that's exactly what we do as part of that. We basically go through and reevaluate some of the assumptions that these lists are built upon.
Fantastic. Will you please add to your list how we assume past data and future conditions and use Crawfordville Highway as an example in that discussion?
Yeah.
Thank you very much, sir.
I'm sorry, no, go ahead.
That would be it, other than I will just say I am very concerned about putting a hold on this and scheduling another meeting, particularly because of what Bryant just reminded us about the legislative session. I am more inclined, unfortunately, to approve this now since we've been working on the one-way design since 2012 and had those options out there. As concerning as it is, I am more concerned about not getting our full list into FDOT at this point. Thank you.
Good, real quick, Mr. Ryan Weatherall with Kimley Horn. Actually, Ryan, you were the project manager on the PD&E engineer record. Ryan may be able to answer some of the questions. So I'm going to put him on the spot and see if he can come up.
Jeremy, I'm sorry, I completely ignored you. Let me let Jeremy talk
I'm sorry.
first.
Sure.
There we go. Kirsten. Yeah, I just want to. This one's hard for me because I don't know enough about this particular project to know what the benefit of what we're doing here personally or what the alternatives would be. I would be inclined to do the second meeting just to be able to gather that information and get that public input. I know we've done, and public input's been the focus that we're pushing towards, and it's hard to be here today because if you look at the picture, it's going to give a lot of people heartburn whether they know what's going on or not. It looks like we're building a NASCAR speedway or something. So I would expect something, whether it's beneficial or not, it's going to garner a lot of public feedback and people are going to have opinions on it. So I would be interested. I just want to make sure we're making the right decision. I know we've already put a lot of money into it, but at the end of the day, if it's the wrong decision, I wasn't here. Most of us, I guess, weren't here, and I want to make sure it's right. And we have the county commissioner from that district. I'm not sure when he became aware of it, how much time he's had to make that position known. But if we're willing to do the extra meeting, I think we could actually make, at least for me, I can make a sound decision based on the facts of the project.
I think,
Is there one more thing? There's no way to, no offense, guys, I don't want to risk Crawfordville Highway on not having a quorum either.
No.
Is there a way to go ahead and adopt it?
I actually spoke to Brian. I told him I'm going to trust him on it. And I actually spoke to the District 1 Commissioner, too. Nobody is interested in losing that funding. and nobody's interested in putting at risk all the other projects that are here, us not having a quorum enough to be able to approve the list that's here. So I want to rescind my substitute motion, okay? I'll make a substitute motion that we approve the list, flip-flopping items 3 and 4. Perfect. But with the caveat that we bring back the design for review after September to this board for project number 1. That way, from what Brian is telling me, that what they would do even if they went ahead and started to acquire that right of way, they would use that right of way to try to figure out a different design than what we're talking about, and also it gives you some time to actually speak with them as well. So that would be my substitute motion, but understand, I want what's being said here by the district commissioner and the citizens that are concerned to be taken into consideration. I definitely want that design to come back, and if we can do anything at all, Brian, to try to address some of those concerns, I like to see it done. So I don't want this just to end the conversation at all because we are approving the funding, but I want it to be a start of whether we're really stuck into where we are as far as the design is concerned, or if there's some wiggle room for us to do some things to address the concerns that were stated here today. So that would be my substitute motion.
I'll second the substitute.
Commissioner Maddox, I rescind my second of your original motion and second your substitute.
All right. All right, we're on motion 3. Hold on, Bill. But I would like to have this issue resolved before I leave. So is there any more discussion? I don't want to walk out of here and come back and find out y'all removed Crawfordville Highway.
Mr. Chairman, I guess the only concern I have is that we're second-guessing professionals that have put a lot of time, energy, and effort into this. I wasn't here in 2012. I didn't come to the commission until 2014. But if we're going to start to second-guess projects like this on the fly, when we don't have the background and experience, what's to say that we don't put a hold on other projects and risk our funding? That's my concern.
The best analogy.
I know how this works. I've been in the legislature, and, you know, there are other people clamoring for that money, and if it looks like we don't want it, it'll go somewhere else in a heartbeat.
Best example I think I can give, you remember we had people come, they didn't want the high school intersection on Crawfordville.
Yeah.
And 3 or 4 people stood up and said it was up to me. I said, yeah, we want it. My daughter drives through it every day now.
Yeah.
And it's much better.
On point to that, I'm not at all interested in delaying a decision to a point that we cannot take advantage of the monies. I don't want anybody to get the money in this program for us. I think you're right on that point, Commissioner Richardson. All I want is, you're right, you weren't here, I think the only people that were maybe here was me and Commissioner Dozier, maybe Commissioner Merritt.
I was here.
I just want to get a look back at, and I didn't necessarily redesign the whole thing. What were the designs that we considered in 2012? Is this the best design out of those designs that we came up with? And then if that's it, let's move forward. I'm not interested in postponing this at all. I don't want to go back to the PD&E part of it. If there's other things we can do, fine. But we waited a long time to get moving on Crawfordville Highway, and I want to move.
Mr. Vice Chair, may I amend this real quick, just on point? I do not want to leave the impression that everything was decided in 2012. I found a presentation that was given to us with options in 2012, but I also have found a presentation from FDOT, whether it's provided to us or at a public meeting from 15, that only shows the one-way option.
Got it.
So since 15, the one-way option has at least been the only one in some of these presentations. Again, I want to be clear, this was just a quick search of the table. I did not want to leave the impression that it was vague for that long.
Okay.
Yes.
Rick, and then Bill wants to make a brief statement, right, Bill? Brief statement?
And I'm going to call the question.
Go ahead, Rick.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Commissioner Richardson, I definitely heard what you said. We can't simply just always go back and look back on projects that we weren't present for. Therein lies the problem with a lot of the MPOs, right? I mean, we'll be collecting Social Security by the time this construction is finished on this project, regardless of how it's done. But we also have an obligation for us to understand that which has come before us, whether it's 2012 when design was discussed or afterwards. A lot of work and design has been done before many of us got to this table. So that's why I support Commissioner Maddox's motion. I think we do not want to lose any of this funding. I don't want to hold on any of it, but I would definitely want to have us go back and understand the design decisions that were made on our number one project. And so that if we have some big concerns about how it was done, if there are other options that we might want to consider, we have the option to do that. I don't want to lose the funding. I don't want the funding spent on PD&E design to go to waste, but we also have an obligation to our citizens here to, number one, understand the decisions that were made and be comfortable with them, and number two, hear what their concerns are and evaluate whether or not we want to revisit any of those. But in summary, I support Commissioner Maddox's motion. I think that gives us the most flexibility without jeopardizing our list or the funding for ROW. Thanks.
All right, Bill, did you want to say something very quickly, and then we're going to vote?
I think Commissioner Dozier was absolutely right when she said that from her remembrance, we had multiple options, but one was not declared as the winner. I think Commissioner Deloge.
Was declared as the winner.
The one that you.
As of 15.
Right, you Google that, but Google can be a silent thing. We have 400 people now, but it's interesting that from her her own memory, without Google, it was that multiple options were presented. Sitting at this table, that was my last impression. But now we have 400 citizens who have become aware of the 2015 decision, and I'm respective and think Commissioner Maddox has framed it right. We want this money. It's shocking to walk in this room and to see 6 out of the top 10 projects Southside. Shocking. So we want it, and we want Crawfordville, Mr. Chairman. The C in my middle name stands for Crawfordville. So,
By the way, every meeting I complain about the quality of the 319 on the south side, and they can all vouch for that, how the sidewalks are dirty. All right, all for the motion.
Mr. Chairman, could you have Commissioner Maddox restate his motion so we know what it is we're doing?
Yes, sir. Commissioner Richardson's motion is simply for us to approve all items, flip-flop items 3 and 4, priorities 3 and 4, and to bring back the design on item number 1 for us to review.
When you say for us to review, I can't review a design. I'm not a transportation. You mean have someone do a presentation?
Yeah, presentation.
On
yes,
the
sir.
design
So, I mean,
with the options.
what was brought back in 2012
Okay.
will be brought back. I'm asking for it to be brought back to us now with a presentation on the options. And when I say for our review, that's what I mean by for our review.
And that's at a special meeting?
No, sir. No, sir. This will be after
Regular
the regular
meeting? Okay.
Yes.
All right.
Yes, sir.
I'm ready to vote.
All for the motion? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? I'm out of here, Nick.
I got it. All right, we'll move now to item 7. I believe we approved 2, 4, and 6, correct?
Yes.
So we're 7-3, 7A3.
All right, Randy. Move staff recommendation, Mr. Chairman.
Staff recommendation been moved by Commissioner Richardson. Is there a second? Seconded by Commissioner Dozier. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion on the floor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries without objection. We'll move now to item 7A5.
I will move the item for discussion.
Item's been moved for discussion by Commissioner Richardson. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Commissioner Matlow.
Mr. Chairman, the issue that I have is that the same 5 projects. That the priority order of the projects, which is the South City Transit Center or our super stop, is now being put lower on the priority order. And Mr. Director, if you could explain why we're recommending that.
Sure, Commissioner. This is what we received from Star Metro for their recommendations. And I don't believe there's anyone from Star Metro here.
Okay. So it came from Star Metro?
Yes, sir. But my I will say semi-educated guess was simply because of the fact that we have design funded, and I believe that the blueprint funding for the South Side comes into play.
Yes.
Will probably be available before 2024.
Right.
And that therefore, I think it's there more if some DOT funding was to become available. In all likelihood, remember, we're programming for 2025.
Okay.
This
Yeah,
point. So
it's
that-
one of, that's why I was
Yes.
concerned, because I know it is one of the top priority blueprint projects.
Yes, sir. And I think that's my guess.
It
That
should
was
be
the line of
funded
thinking.
before 2025.
But again, what's shown on here is just
Okay.
state, or actually technically here, federal funding.
Okay.
I think that was the reason for the move down, is they felt that more than likely the
Right.
blueprint money would come into play for construction.
Right.
Before any state or federal money would be available.
Makes sense. I'm good.
Commissioner Dozier?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Commissioner Richardson, I guess I had similar questions here in making sure I was seeing the list correctly. It's a 1 through 5 ranking,
Yes.
but I didn't necessarily, these items to me are very different if you were going to rank them than individual road projects. Am I correct in
Yes,
thinking
ma'am.
that way?
This is a very varied list. So, these have multiple sources of potential funding, but I think this was more, in talking to Star Metro, for the number one there, that would be the top, for that amount of money, I think is what they were looking at. If that were available, that's where they would put it. I believe the construction cost, and I'll use the South City Transit Center, is around $2.5 million, I think. Somewhere it's at $5 million.
$5 million.
Okay. Yeah. And as you can see, most of the rest of them are nowhere near that amount. But Commissioner Dozier, you are correct. This is a much more varied list in terms of types of projects that are on it.
Okay.
I would, two thoughts here. One of the comments we heard was about bus shelters, covers for bus shelters, and that was a very good comment. We know the city has been working on that. You have various designs around the city.
That's a budget issue for us.
Right, and so bus stop upgrades are number 2 on this list. And I was prepared to think, when we heard your comment before, that most of that was a budget issue on the city side, and yet there is some funding that potentially could come through CRTPA process for this. So just with 2 things there. One, this is much more clear than what I've seen in the past of kind of breaking out Star Metro's request, because it was pretty much exclusively a city issue, so we didn't get a whole lot of details. So I like this. It may help in the future to understand the funding sought, what those different sources are. Or is that exclusively DOT?
Primarily on this list, it's for DOT.
It's for
funding.
DOT,
Yes, ma'am.
okay.
We could list sources, but off the top of my head, I could think of 5 or 6 different potential pots of money that this could come from. But we can always do that, but honestly, it's kind of a crapshoot as to what flavor of money, as we like to say, that they're going to wind up with, if they get any at all.
As a commissioner or a constituent reading this list, it may help to at least know this is one of multiple funding sources for bus stops. I don't know if that helps us. Just, we've got engaged constituents who are reading these things, and it might help to know. But I don't want to levy too much work, so good note about how many different sources of funding. Does that work for you, Commissioner Richardson?
Sure. And I can tell you that one of our priorities, as you've probably noticed around town, we are upgrading the transit bus stops, but that is a huge budget issue. It's not just as simple as going out, putting up shelters. It's a tremendous budget issue.
A lot of times right-of-way is an issue. There's not nearly as much right-of-way as you think on the side of a road.
Exactly. So, but it is a priority for us. I see people, one of the things that I do, I collect umbrellas in my car, and when I ride around and I see people, especially women with babies, I give them an umbrella if it's raining or, that's one of the things that I do because we don't have shelters in many locations. But it is a priority for us, and we're certainly aware of it.
Thank you, Commissioner.
I don't need to say anything.
Item 785 has been moved.
We need a vote on 5.
I know.
Those on what?
That's
We
what
didn't get a vote yet.
I know. I got it.
Oh, okay.
Item 785 has been moved by Commissioner Richardson, seconded by Commissioner Matt Lowe. All those in favor of the motion on the floor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries our objection. We'll go now to 7B. Is this an action item?
No, sir, this is not.
Are there any more action items left?
Yes, items C, D, and E are all action items.
Okay. C, D, and E are all action items?
Yes, sir.
Can we skip to those action items, please?
That is the chair's prerogative.
Let's do that. We're going to come back to that one. I just want to get to C, D, and E and then come back to B, if that's okay. Any objections? All right. Item C.
Mr. Chairman, item C is a proposed amendment to our Unified Planning Work Program to add a feasibility study for the Tallahassee to Monticello Trail along US 90. As I mentioned in the agenda item, this is part of DEP's Greenways priority list. It's also a part of our upcoming bicycle pedestrian master plan. So we're proposing to undertake this study in-house, or actually, in-house with our consultant for $100,000 to do that initial feasibility study. Once that's done, then we would begin to seek SunTrails funding, which is the same pot that's paying for portions of the coastal trail, to fund that trail, that link between Tallahassee and Monticello along US 90.
Move staff recommendation, Mr. Chairman.
Staff recommendation moved by Commissioner Richardson, seconded by Commissioner Minor. Any objection? Seeing none, we'll move to item D. Commissioner Dozier, did you have a comment? Did you have a comment on it?
No.
Move staff recommendation on item D, Mr. Chairman.
Any comment on D? Seeing none, is there a motion made by Commissioner Richards? Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Commissioner Minor. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Item E.
Mr. Chairman, this would be an update to our staff services agreement that we have with the City of Tallahassee. In the agenda memo, I outlined some of the major changes to this agreement, starting with Section 4B. There was a provision in the old agreement that the city could include us as part of their audit in terms of issuing the contract, but since they now, City of Tallahassee now actually uses local preference per our federal funds, we are not allowed to use just blanking the term, geographic preference for a criteria of selection. So we've eliminated that. Item 4C eliminates the option for new employees to select the Florida Retirement Services Plan, or FRS. This was something that's been offered in the past, but the issue that I have been concerned about is the fact that we don't have a readily available mechanism to track a CRTP employee who is under the county system, their sick and vacation time. That posed an issue with the last person that retired out of the county side of it. And it was actually, as I mentioned, it was discussed as part of the OIG audit, but since we don't have anyone currently under the county system, they did not make it a finding. Section 5B, this was an issue from the OIG audit regarding the city's, the city provides us with calculations in terms of things such as HR services, procurement, administrative costs, and things like that. And the other two deal with us establishing our own travel policies separate from the city's and changing the duration of the agreement from 7 to 5 years.
Greg, why would you want to change it from 7 to 5? Was there a reason for that?
I honestly don't know that I've ever seen a 7-year agreement. I think
Okay.
5's typically more standard in the statute. Okay. And also, too, as counsel reminded me, this is subject to the final legal review.
Okay. All right.
All right. Is there a motion for approval?
So move.
Motion 7, staff recommendation for 7E has been moved by Commissioner Richardson. Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Seconded by Commissioner Matlow. Any discussion? Seeing none, is there any objection? Seeing none, we'll show it as approved. We'll move back now to 7B. I believe that we have finished with all of our action items, correct?
Yes, sir.
All right. 7B.
Going back to Commissioner Dozier's question earlier about looking at how we prioritize our projects, what we're doing today is actually the kickoff for our 2045 Regional Mobility Plan. If you recall, Kimley Horn was selected a few months ago as the consultant on this. And we have Ryan Weatherall here to give you kind of the kickoff presentation. So please bombard him with as many questions as you can.
Chairman, board members, staff, thank you for the opportunity to be here. It's under peculiar circumstances. It's actually me making this presentation. My partner had plane issues flying into Tallahassee this morning, so last minute I got some notes, and we're going to try to make it through this. But to give you guys sort of a understanding of where we're going with the 2045 Regional Mobility Plan update. So a couple of key things there. It is an update to the plan that was done several years ago, so we're not starting wholly from scratch. And then in addition to that, this is something that's done every 5 years. So the last plan was a 2040 plan, and we'll be working to update that. So My partner Allison, who's our project manager, has put together a great team of staff, not only internally Kimley Horn, but also other partners with RS&H, who will be helping with a number of the critical elements, Carpe Diem, who will be focused specifically on the public engagement aspect, and we'll talk about what those aspects look like in just a few minutes. And then Panhandle Engineering and Construction Services, who specifically are in the trenches on design and construction activities and can help us understand what the cost estimates most closely matching the market are so that we can program those funds and work with our partners to see that they get prioritized and funded. So that's the team. So again, the focus of this is to update our plan, and we're going to focus on the changing funding levels and funding strategies. The last plan was completed under MAP 21, the federal funding program at the time. The FAST Act is now the program that we're working under, and there's some things that have changed between those and where we were 5 years ago and where we are today. Of course, the economy is continuing to grow, and we look forward to the benefits of that. Shifting demographics. We're seeing more and more of our young population move back to that urban core. It's changing the way that we plan the transportation in our communities, so we'll consider that. Performance-based planning. We'll talk a little bit more about this as we move through as it relates to the federal funding program, but there are targets in here at this time that we can actually look at as we're moving through the planning process. And then renewed expectations. Again, this is an update to the plan. So again, it looks at the federal requirements, and we make sure that our plan works well and fits within that. We look at the guiding principles and goals, some of the early things that we'll do in this process. The modeling and analysis and the framework of transportation, we'll focus on that. And when we say transportation, we're talking about all modes across the entire region. So things are different in downtown Tallahassee as they are maybe in Monticello or Crawfordville, and we'll look at that. And then we'll develop a plan, and then we'll report that information and data and the reporting there. All of this is done in a transparent process with public engagement at each step, as well as updates to this board as we go through the process and the advisory committees.
How do you all reach out to the various communities? What's your mechanism of?
So I got an entire slide on that focuses but I'll go ahead and touch on it real quickly. There's not only the technology-based side of things, the web and the social media and that kind of thing. We also have formal face-to-face engagements and are available for informal stakeholder and face-to-face engagements as well for those that maybe aren't as savvy or aren't as comfortable with the technology side of things. So we'll talk a little bit more about that in just a moment. So again, I mentioned the federal planning goals and the targets and the things that have been updated. There are two new things that weren't here 5 years ago that we're going to be focusing on, and those are number 9 and number 10. And what's great is the City of Tallahassee, Leon County, CRTPA already have a big jump start on this as it relates to focusing on resiliency as a community, as well as travel and tourism. So we've got a lot of information to bake into this and build upon that's already there as opposed to having to create those last two. So the performance measures, again, I mentioned those earlier that we've got, and we'll stay focused on these as we go through the process, all 6 of these. But of course, safety is critically important. The status or condition of our infrastructure, the reliability. We talked about hurricane evacuation and the ability to make sure that it meets the needs not only day in and day out, but during those critical situations as well. The economic component, freight mobility and economic vitality, and then congestion reduction and environmental sustainability. So in environmental sustainability, we'll take a look at the air quality and those kinds of things and what it means from an environmental perspective. Again, this is a multimodal process. This looks at all aspects. It looks at the bicycle, the pedestrian, the transit users, your traditional passenger car, your freight and your trucks. It also includes aviation in this. And so we'll ping our partners within the aviation industry as part of this process as well. Technology and transportation. Certainly we are in a very dynamic time as it relates to technology and transportation. And as we think about this plan, again, this is a 2045 plan. Where will we be 25 years from now? It's hard to wrap our mind around it, and that's why we update this every 5 years. But certainly there's a lot to consider, and it seems like each year now the legislature is approving some sort of new law, and the governor is signing it in. And so we'll continue to keep a pulse on that and try to look ahead as we consider the transportation technologies, whether it's connected vehicles or automated vehicles and the network that comes along with those. Again, we will focus on the needs of our region, but make sure that they meet the state and federal requirements, again, so that we can coordinate with our partners at DOT to ensure that that funding is available for the projects that we decide to prioritize through this process. Public engagement, certainly a critical piece of any plan such as this. We want to make sure that folks have an opportunity to come to the table, have their voices be heard. And this is our community's transportation plan. So we want to make sure that there's an opportunity for them to help shape that. It starts at the front end, and it continues all the way through the end. So I mentioned the in-person activities. We'll have the stakeholder meetings, public workshops. Your committees will engage with them, and then there'll be other outreach as well. In addition to that, certainly a technology component. A lot of folks like the ability to respond from home or on the weekends, wherever they may be. So email opportunities, online surveys, and other social media and web presence will be used throughout the course of this. So significant milestones in the process. The initial public outreach will begin this summer and move into the fall. And the key to this is that we want to begin at the front end. As we're beginning to gather data as it relates to the update, we want to hear from the community and make sure that what we are seeing through the data vets out with what the community is experiencing and seeing. We'll then move through that existing conditions evaluation and analyses and then come to a set of cost feasible projects about this time next year, with the goal of this being completed in about an 18-month period, being wrapped up at the end of next year. So I mentioned some of those immediate near-term activities, a significant public engagement beginning, and then beginning to develop the plan through the guiding principles, the goals, the data gathering, and the existing conditions reporting. So that's where we're at with beginning the 2045 mobility plan update or long-range transportation plan update. I'll do my best to answer any questions that you may have.
Any questions? Mr. Dozier?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ryan, the presentation's not downloading fast enough here, but to Commissioner Richardson's point, I was lucky enough to serve on the selection committee, so full disclosure with that. Chris Rito was also on the committee. Jack, yes?
Yes, I was.
Yes, you were there in the room, yes. Okay, so I didn't want to conflate this with anything else, but you had a couple of options for public outreach that really stood out to me. Am I correct in thinking there was a meeting, I want to say maybe Texas or something that you all had referenced, maybe I'm thinking of something else, but it was a number of agencies coming together for a public meeting? Am I thinking about that correctly, or I should probably pose this question to Allison later.
If I grab my phone, she's probably texting me. She's watching this from afar, so she'll probably text me.
Allison, don't stress. I will ask you about this later. I will simply say that I was impressed by the range of public outreach, the kind of unique ways that you all are going to address this issue, get us out of do some of the same things we've done before, but also look at this in a different way. And direct person-to-person communication. So forgive me, Commissioner Ryan, for putting you and Allison on the spot there, but I just wanted to give you the opportunity because it was, I'm really excited about this round. I think the public outreach is going to be great. So.
And I will say, I would not be surprised because we are looking for ways to continually move the ball forward as it relates to public involvement because you're right. There's always new technologies. The old methods begin to get stale and people move past those. And so we're always having to look at ways to make sure we're getting the broadest of audiences and engaging them in a meaningful way. So I'm sure that that's baked into that.
That's what I remember. So thank you very much.
Jack?
Commissioner, I think what you were referring to was the traffic jam event that they had where they pulled together all sorts of transportation departments, activities, different like automated cars, and they pulled together an event that didn't just address the long-range plan, but it addressed questions that the community had in general about transportation projects and this would be bigger because it's a 4-county region, but for that event, and that's the one thing that I thought, was kind of the gelling factor for that plan in terms of public involvement. So yeah, it's called the traffic jam.
Thank you. It was a really catchy name too. That's why it stood out. And it was a great way to engage citizens, get them into the space, whether they were interested in one small piece or another. Maybe they didn't know they were interested in the rest. So yes, that was it. Allison will be happy you remembered it.
I hope she is.
Yes.
Commissioner Minor?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ryan, thanks for the presentation. Looking forward to your work on this. Just real quick, on one of the slides you said the initial public outreach would be summer and fall of 2019, right?
Yes, sir.
Yes. You know this. A lot of the Tallahassee folks are just kind of, they're not really as engaged on these types of things until maybe mid-September. Just want to make sure that we're all cognizant of that, because I don't think once summer's over, kids go back to school, then I think they're starting to pay attention. So I want to make sure we don't miss any of that public outreach, because we rely on so much that during the summer and early fall. So.
Absolutely, yeah. No, I think the idea is that there's a lot of pre-work that goes into public engagement, yeah. And so we will begin those activities as we're kicking this off. And so you're right, we will look to engage the people when they're available.
Perfect. Great. Thank you.
Thanks for pointing that out.
Thank you. Anything else on item? Thank you. Item number 9. Thought we just did 8. Item number 8.
You just talked to
That's right. We've had so much conversation over here. I've had my DOT report already. Item number 8.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The department just has one item for the board today. It's the annual joint certification between the department and the CRTPA. We've reviewed their certification package, and we're going to submit to Federal Highway a full certification with no exceptions. CRTPA staff's doing great toward those issues that were previously mentioned with the invoicing and the other items. We foresee them continuing that effort, and we had no major concerns.
Okay. Thank you, Brian. I want to thank you for the work you're doing with us. Even in that issue today, your willingness to chime in and let us know what our options are, that's well appreciated. So I want to let you know we appreciate the job you're doing. Item number 9, Commissioner Richards, we'll see. Item number 9.
Mr. Chairman, I actually got a few things. One of the things, in addition to the quarterly budget update, as well as the project status report, I included an update on our responses to the OIG audit. Would you like me to go over those, or do anybody have any questions on that? I think by and large we're pretty well caught up with everything. One of the issues that we addressed today was actually the update to the staff services agreement, to knock that one off. I think pretty much everything else, we'd either already taken care of or have since the presentation to you all back in January, or December. A couple of other things I wanted to talk about. At our last meeting, we talked about a request that came from, Chris, you're going to help me, I forget who it was from, for a new interchange in Gadsden County and I-10 that came out of the RPC. We were asked to do some research and possibly provide a letter of support. One of the things that we found in our review is actually it does not meet spacing requirements per federal guidelines. Mr. Rito had actually submitted a letter to DOT to get some questions answered on that, and they have not received a response. So we at least wanted to wait until we got those answers just before we moved forward with any type of recommendation for you all to do a approval of that. And then lastly, I actually have to go back and look this acronym up. The Multi-Use Corridors of Regional Economic Significance, or MCORS. I sent you all an email probably about 2 months ago as the session wrapped up. That was the 3 corridors that were identified in a Senate bill that was ultimately approved and then signed by the governor. One of those corridors, the extension of the Suncoast Parkway, has the potential to impact at least Jefferson County. I had hoped to have a little more information and detail. I know the department's going through and working up their approach to it. Because we have such a gap in our meeting between now and September, my educated guess is they will probably do something similar to what they did with the I-75 task force that I was involved in before I came up here, which was the task force itself was comprised of local elected officials as well as folks from Audubon and a couple of other agencies. I don't know if between now and then we'll get a letter. We're hoping to have a letter by now, but requesting a representative from the CRTPA. We have not gotten that yet. I don't know if you want to entertain the idea of appointing someone today, so at least if that letter does come between now and September, that we have someone that's appointed. I am quite certain that Jefferson County will have representation on that task force. I'm assuming that will probably be Ms. Barfield or Commissioner Barfield. So with that, I'll leave it up to you. We could wait until September. My only concern there is if the task force were to have its first meeting prior to September.
You said Commissioner Barfield will likely already be on the committee?
She'll likely be Jefferson County's representation. And the way it's set up is there is at least, I believe, probably a county commissioner from each county in the potential path. I know there's a lot of discussion about cities as well. So Jefferson County, they were actually identified in the statute as kind of the termini of the project. There's also space on there for an MPO representative.
You know, what I would recommend, because I don't want to take the chair's authority away to a point, I mean, he is the chair, it is his job. What I would recommend is that if you're interested in being the appointee, that you send an email to our executive director. If you could pass that list on to our chair and allow him to let you know who he would like to appoint. Does anybody see any problem with that? Yes.
I don't know what to call you because you're not even the vice chair, so I'm just going to call you Mr. President.
I like it.
If anyone's missed this, Commissioner Maddox was, I'm getting really informal now, installed as the Florida Association of Counties president last Thursday evening. So, Mr. President, as is. I like the general direction. I think instead of just picking from names of people who are interested, I think we have an opportunity to get a strong representation on this group, perhaps. Chris just mentioned that ARPC, the Regional Planning Council, should have some membership as well. So, for example, if another Jefferson County commissioner was selected, Commissioner Barfield may want that seat, and that may be more than appropriate to have two Jefferson County folks there. So I'm just wondering if we can reflect on, if we have time, to talk to ARPC, through Chris, talk to Jefferson County, see who else is going to be appointed to make sure we're strategic about our appointment.
I like that.
Does that work for you, Greg?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
I still do you disagree in the interim though? Those who want, I mean, because here's the thing.
Back, yeah.
If let's say I think actually does work out better if someone else is appointed from Jefferson County and then Commissioner Barfield is allowed to represent this board. They will be the most heavily impacted. That makes the most sense. Sure. But let's say she is selected from Jefferson County, then I do want there to be a list to be able to pick from. So, but if you could reach out, if nobody else objects to this, reach out maybe to Jefferson County and tell them that of the thoughts that we have from this board of maybe recommending someone else so Commissioner Barfield could sit from this board. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir, that's fine.
All right. Any other discussion on that item? All right, seeing none. Anything else for you?
No, Jack.
Sir? Board members? Anything board members? Yes, sir. Commissioner Minor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, or Mr. President. Just wanted to say that I went to the MPOAC training 3 weeks ago, and it was outstanding. I mean, we go to a lot of these trainings as commissioners, right? But the content, the instructors were terrific, just really well done. And I think everyone here has probably been to it by now, but Commissioner Merritt actually had not been. But I can see why you all were recommending that we go, and it was very worthwhile. Thank you.
I had to give Commissioner Merritt a little grief about that. He's a little slacker. He's been here for 10 years and hasn't been. It's an excellent opportunity, though. Yeah. I do want to make the board aware of something that we will be entertaining at our commission meeting tomorrow. Commissioner Brian Loach, who's here today, has asked for consideration from our board to be appointed to the CRTPA board. We have not yet discussed yet, and well, I guess this is publicly noticed, so I can actually say this here, whether or not it will be one of two options. Either he would replace a member, or we would add a member. We do understand there's a process that we have to go through with the CRTPA to do that, but I did want to let the board know and put on record that he is interested in coming back in as a member of the CRTPA. The second thing is session is over. I don't think we've had a presentation from Ms. McCusker yet. Maybe in September, if you can come back and just tell us what happened during session this year. I know it's a few months from session. I believe at that point, session would have started again. So maybe you can tell us what happened last year and what's coming up this year. I think that'd be a worthy presentation for us. And the last thing is, you probably saw that the governor signed the bill for autonomous vehicles. I don't know if you guys are at all interested in the presentation on that, but when there's a car driving around with no hands on the steering wheel, I like to know how it's going to work around here. So I'm wondering if there's some kind of way we can have a presentation from staff or some professional, or maybe even Carl during that same meeting in September, to tell us what that actually means, what the future of transportation looks like with autonomous vehicles on the road. I just saw a commercial last night already for an autonomous Cadillac. It was. I mean, already they're already selling them. So I like to, if there's no objection, I would like to actually hear more about
That would probably be a good item for our retreat.
Okay.
Those are a bit more informal.
Great. Commissioner Dozier?
I would like to say we've got a lot of summer interns and others who have been with us the last couple of hours in the audience. That was great. And a comment I heard this morning, I would love to have as part of that discussion any ways that autonomous vehicles can increase accessibility for people who may not be able to drive otherwise.
Perfect.
I would love to hear that, and I will thank Ms. Paloma for inspiring me to ask that question today. Thanks.
Well,
I think that would be, actually, I think it'd be better, I think you said it right, it'd be better discussed during retreat.
At the retreat would be
Would
fine.
anybody object
Yes.
that being a part of the retreat? I don't know who you have to get to come in to have the discussion with us, but find somebody. So that would be the retreat. We look for Carl to come back at the September board meeting with a presentation. And if there's nothing else.
Mr. Chairman, actually, I did have one thing.
Yes,
Going
sir.
back to, and actually, I met with Commissioner Deloge this morning on the bike pad, and we were talking a little about the appointment. Remember, we're still going through the process of having everybody approve the interlocal agreement to update the voting structure.
Yes.
That is my goal is to have that done by your September meeting, I hope. But that actually, if you recall, that limited both the city of Tallahassee and Leon County to 3 members. Technically, we're still under the weighted. You can add once per year, but it may be a case by the time we get to September, if we've got all the interlocal, have it completely updated, you may be limited to 3 members. So just keep that in mind as you go through it tomorrow.
Commissioner Dozier?
Commissioner Maddox, I wasn't going to belabor this point now because we will be able to discuss it at Leon County Commission tomorrow night, but I did raise that issue with County Administrator today simply because we may not have another meeting where we can have 4 members. So I think we can all discuss that at our commission meeting tomorrow. But yes, Greg, I conveyed that same information we discussed back to.
Quick question, though. The interlocal will have to be signed by all parties in order for it to be valid, correct?
Yes, sir. All 4 counties, Tallahassee, the school board, and then the 5 municipalities in Gadsden County.
So if we did so decide we wanted 4, we didn't have to sign it in the moment. We could actually not sign it and make an amendment to it, correct?
You could, but that's going against what this board has already decided.
I understand. All right. Anything else? Seeing nothing, we're adjourned. Thank you.